by Head Mitz. Part 2. The federal agent swapped out in several shifts. Finally, an elderly man with a head of silver hair walked right up to Riley and shook her hand with absolute solemnity. I have reported this directly to the Pentagon. Now, I need to ask you to come with us. Understood, Riley. Riley stood up, calmly closed her eyes, and let them pull the black hood over her head. She was taken to a deep underground federal research facility. After a grueling battery of tests, the lab's lead scientist concluded that Riley was completely brain dead. Her heart had stopped beating. Yet, here she was, right now, standing flesh and bone right in front of them, speaking into a secure phone line with the top brass, her face dead serious. We have less than 24 hours. Tonight at 7:32 p.m., the Pacific Northwest and the Eastern Seaboard are both going to be hit by catastrophic torrential rain. It will be a sudden, completely unpredicted storm. Tomorrow, the lightning strikes will ignite the national forests, triggering massive mega fires. These fires will burn for over half a month. In the end, it will take a tsunami to finally extinguish them. Riley was wearing a heavy, specialized shock collar around her neck, gripping a military-grade comms unit in her hand. And she kept talking. It is exactly 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If the torrential rain hits at exactly 7:32, then please believe me and evacuate the civilian population immediately. The researchers in the lab were frantically running around. The directors from the National Weather Service quickly sent over a flashing transmission validating the absolute truth of her prediction. I would never use the fate of the human race as some kind of sick joke. From the other end of the receiver came the heavy, distinct sound of raindrops violently hammering against a glass window. The top brass went dead silent for a long moment. Then a voice asked, "What exactly does the future of humanity look like?" Countless horrors and endless suffering flashed right before Riley's eyes. Thousands of miles of beautiful country turned into festering scars. The vast, sweeping plains sidered into impassable, gaping chasms. Humanity huddled together, shivering in the crumbling ruins, forged from fallen skyscrapers, never hearing the ringing of New Year's bells again, never seeing the distant stars in the night sky again. But Riley swallowed it all and simply said, "Humanity's future is in our hands. The land is vast, and the lights of millions of homes will keep burning." The torrential rain arrived exactly on schedule. Hurricane-force winds ripped massive trees out by their roots, sweeping them violently into the terrifying pitch-black night. The frantic chaos of the emergency evacuation mandates spacked endless, echoing voices of sheer panic across every major social media platform. Residents of those two regions were furiously demanding answers. Why the hell were they being forced to evacuate in the middle of the night? The federal government's hesitation was glaringly obvious. They were simply terrified that the public would panic too hard, sparking massive riots or even triggering extreme, violent behavior. Holding back the floodgates is worse than directing the water. Tell them the truth. Tell them this storm is a catastrophic, unprecedented disaster. Do not keep the public blindly in the dark. The director of the research facility let out a heavy sigh, swiping his keycard to open the elevator doors. Whatever you're thinking. The president and the cabinet have definitely thought of it too. Right now, the top brass is in an emergency closed-door meeting, drawing up contingency plans. Once they completely believe me, I will tell them everything. But right now, There are two critical priorities. Riley opened her hand, then clenched it tightly in the empty air. 1. Evacuate the civilians. 2. Extinguish the megafires. And let me add one more thing. The civilians definitely won't all be able to evacuate in time. In those remote areas with dead communication grids, there are definitely still people trapped. I am going in to get them out. The facility director's face instantly went ice cold. He decisively and ruthlessly rejected her demand. Absolutely not. Setting aside your current classified status, you are just a frail, defenseless teenage girl. How exactly are you going to carry people out? Riley shot him a flat look, reaching up to yank on the heavy shock collar locked around her neck. Because this collar is completely useless against me. Because I am already a dead woman. Firefighters get exhausted. They suffer from heat exhaustion and smoke inhalation. I don't. This is my one and only unique ability, and it's one of the very few ways I can actually make a tangible difference. The megafires roared into existence and battling against the torrential downpour. This night, devouring countless acres of national forest. The top brass finally completely believed her. They classified her as a level 1 national security asset. Even when she walked into a bathroom stall, there were armed operators standing guard right outside the door. Even though Riley no longer had any biological need to use the restroom, she just couldn't stand their suffocating surveillance. I'm a dead corpse. I literally cannot be assassinated. You guys really don't need to be this tense. The SWAT operator at the door pressed his lips together, looking like he wanted to speak but stopping himself. Oh, the higher-ups are terrified I'm going to suddenly mutate. So you guys are here to chop me into pieces the second I do. Riley nodded in sudden understanding. Tough gig. Before the megafires began their explosive, exponential expansion, the blaze had to be contained. Otherwise, it would play out exactly like her past life. Humanity wouldn't just suffer catastrophic casualties. They would be forced to permanent abandon massive tracts of habitable land, driven to migrate into remote, barren wastelands filled with overwhelming anxiety. Riley dialed the direct line to the top brass. If you're still calling to demand to go to the front lines, you can save your breath. I can give you every single piece of intel inside my head. Right now, I'll give it all to you with zero reservations. But I can only be useful if I am physically on the ground. Isn't minimizing the casualty rate the ultimate goal here? The voice on the other end remained dead silent. Riley took a deep breath, her dry, dead eye sockets, doc sans, again uncontrollably spilling tears. If you are still dead set on locking me in a cage, I will literally walk through a hail of bullets to break out. I am not a living person. I do not feel fatigue. I do not feel hunger or thirst. I will run through the night straight to the disaster zone. Do you want to know why I chose to cooperate with the federal government on day 1? Because I want to mitigate civilian casualties, to reduce senseless, unnecessary sacrifices. I could have easily hoarded my own survival supplies and hid in some isolated, quiet corner of the world to steal a few extra years. I could have triggered mass hysteria and incited global chaos. But all I want is for the people to be safe. The top brass hung up the phone. Riley handed the receiver back to the facility director and stood quietly by the reinforced window of the ground-level lab, watching the torrential rain pour down. 2 hours later, the direct line rang again. A dedicated military transport is spinning up to take you there. Riley simply replied, "Okay." It was only when she stood face to face with the megafire that she truly understood just how utterly terrifying it was. Even as a walking corpse, she could feel that horrifying, blistering heat wave. Waves of wildland firefighters charged in, batch after batch, pushing against the melting heat and towering walls of flame, completely casting aside their own survival. They threw themselves into the inferno relentlessly, without rest. Riley went through a crash course with the local fire battalion chief. He taught her how to operate the high-pressure hoses, how to brace against the kickback, and how to effectively suppress a moving fire line. Even though he clearly didn't believe that Riley, a scrawny, fragile-looking teenager, possessed any kind of special abilities, he still maintained a dead serious, professional demeanor, drilling every single safety protocol into her head without skipping a single detail. Remember, the second things look bad, you pull out immediately. Do not push your luck. As long as you stay alive, that is more important than anything else. Right? Riley couldn't help but let a small smile slip. The battalion chief stared deeply at her, then looked out toward the towering, uncontrollably raging inferno just a few hundred yards away. He gave her an incredibly solemn, grim nod, but Riley wasn't exactly among the living anymore. She turned around and charged into the raging inferno right alongside them. She pushed through the towering barrier of neon orange flames, stepping deeper and deeper into the absolute heart of the fire. In a momentary daze, she peered through the wall of fire and spotted a dilapidated rural logging town. Chief, look over there. Is that a town inside the perimeter? The chief stole a frantic glance deep into the smoke and immediately shook his head. Negative. Are you hallucinating from the heat? Riley wiped the boiling rainwater viciously from her face. With the enhanced mutated eyesight of the infected, it was absolutely impossible for her to see it wrong. Dozens of locals were dragging soaked timber and debris, trying to build a desperate barricade at the edge of the fire line. She could even clearly see the deep wrinkles on an old-timer's face. She could see the damp, unlit cigarette dangling from his lips. I need to push deeper into the center of the fire. There's a town trapped behind that wall of flames. There are people inside. But the fire is about to overrun them any second now. Riley pulled back to the staging area and reported the situation to her dedicated federal liaison. Please update the Pentagon and immediately on the exact tactical situation here. If the fire crews ask where I am, tell them I passed out from heat exhaustion and I'm currently in the medical tent. The liaison nodded, looking incredibly torn and uneasy. Riley dropped the heavy fire hose and plunged straight back into the flames through an unguarded, desolate flank. The blistering heat punched right through the hazmat suit, broiling her skin. The rendered fat baking out of her pores that made the inside of the suit grotesquely slick and sticky. The flesh fusing against the synthetic fabric had long since melted from the sheer thermal load, only to be violently forced into rapid regeneration by the catalytic mutation running through her veins. Thank God, she was just a breathing, empty husk anyway. Riley burst out of the tree line, entirely engulfed in flames. She dropped to the dirt immediately, rolling twice in the thick, muddy puddles to extinguish herself. People in the town stared at her like a horrifying alien threat. Riley ripped off her heavy visor, revealing an incredibly bruised, soot-stained face. The torrential rain instantly soaked her to the bone, and she was deeply thankful the downpour was intensifying. Even though this entire isolated town was already completely swallowed by the roaring megafire. She gasped out a ragged breath. The old-timer with the unlit cigarette beat her to the punch. He spoke up first. "Look at you, kid. You didn't get burned anywhere, did you? Hurry up. Get inside the cabin and drink some water. Use old-timers can hold the line a little longer. The fire, they ain't breaching this." He pointed to the reinforced dirt brick house behind him, then pointed at Riley, and finally pointed at the rapidly deteriorating firebreak that the flames were devouring. The rainwater soaked deep into the heavy wrinkles on his face, standing there against the backdrop of the inferno. He looked like an ancient stone gargoyle standing guard over a forgotten tomb. The older folks who lived at the base of these mountains all knew how to dig fire breaks, how to clear a perimeter. But this mega fire was violently aggressive. If they stalled any longer, every single soul here would inevitably be reduced to ash in that sea of fire. Riley opened her mouth to order everyone to evacuate immediately. But before the words could leave her throat, a little boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, came sprinting up, tumbling and stumbling over the mud. The moment he opened his mouth, a panicked sob ripped out. "Grandpa, the fire broke through the back of the town." The old man silently took a drag of his unlit cigarette. Riley quickly dropped to a crouch, pulling the little boy into her arms, wiping the cold rainwater from his face. "It's going to be okay. The National Guard and the fire crews are right out there. I'm going to get you all out of here. Don't be afraid. We're too old to hike out of here anyway. Staying behind ain't so bad. Our souls belong to this dirt." Riley's hands froze midair. 7 or 8 of the town's elderly residents gathered around. A few terrified, shivering children slung tightly to the backs of the adults, their eyes wide with sheer panic. Riley patted the little boy on the head, doing her best to steady his racing heart. "You take the kids and get out of here," the old man said. "Use old-timers can buy you some time." The kids aren't going to agree to that. Riley turned her head and looked the little boy in the eye. "Do you want to stay with your grandpa forever?" The boy nodded with absolute, unshakable determination. The roaring flames reflected in his wide eyes, making him look fiercely full of hope. "Listen to my orders, all of you. Fall back to the open dirt clearing first. The rain is heavy. The fire won't consume it that fast." After leading every last one of them to the muddy clearing, Riley took a massive risk and plunged right back into the mega fire, pushing against the blistering, flesh-melting heat. She dragged herself outward, one grueling footprint at a time. The hazmat suit on her body had long since melted into slag. The flames were already licking at the corners of her eyes. They burned right across her field of vision, turning everything into a blurry, glowing smear. Finally, breaking through the tree line, she saw the battalion chief again. His face was twisted in sheer frantic panic. "What the hell happened?" "Medics. Where are the damn medics?" Riley hacked up a mouthful of gray ash. She desperately grabbed the chief's heavy turnout coat. "There's no time to explain. There is an isolated logging town to the east. The fire perimeter is about to collapse on them. Scramble the nearest Blackhawks for immediate medevac. Do it now." One of her eyeballs had been severely cooked by the heat, leaking thick, cloudy fluid down her cheek. It was severely messing with her vision, making everything look like a warped, hazy nightmare. Riley stumbled heavily to her feet, staggering over to her federal liaison. "Give me the GPS beacon. The military-grade encrypted one." He hesitated for a long, agonizing moment. before finally ripping it off his comms rig and shoving it into her hand. Riley threw the beacon into her mouth and swallowed it whole. "You're being too extreme," the liaison yelled. "Even if your biology is different from ours, you shouldn't be pulling suicide stunts like this. I'm just completely out of time. Tell the pilots to follow the beacon signal. Move." Riley stripped off the melted slag and threw on a fresh hazmat suit, sprinting straight back into the sea of flames. The military choppers arrived incredibly fast. Just minutes after she made it back to the town, the pilots and rescuers touched down. Right before the fire line breached the edge of the town, they successfully loaded every single resident and airlifted them to a secure extraction zone. But a deep, gnawing anxiety kept clawing at Riley's gut. She flatly rejected the pilot's desperate offer to pull her out with them, giving him some vague, half-assed explanation about her unique physiological condition. The Blackhawks lifted off, evacuating the immediate disaster zone. Riley began a grid search along the edge of the town. Finally, near an old, reinforced root cellar, she heard the muffled, choked sound of crying. She found a filthy, soot-covered little girl, her face streaked with tears. "Why are you hiding down here? Come on, let's get you to a safe zone." But the little girl just shook her head. Nobody wants me." "You don't have to either?" The megafire had already completely encircled the town. There was only one narrow gap where the flames were slightly weaker. Riley ripped off her heavy hazmat suit, wrapping it entirely around the little girl to shield her. Then she tore off a piece of fabric, soaked it in the pouring rainwater, and pressed it firmly over the girl's mouth and nose. "Why wouldn't anyone want you? I came all the way back here specifically to get you out. No one is getting left behind. That is exactly why I'm here." Riley pulled the little girl tightly against her chest and dove headfirst into the wall of fire. The flames incinerated her skin. They melted the muscle right off her chassis. Her accelerated regeneration couldn't keep up with the catastrophic thermal damage. By the time they pushed through, her arms were burned down to practically nothing but exposed bone. "Don't look up." Don't look at anything. Just keep breathing. We're almost out." By the time Riley staggered blindly out of the fire's perimeter, the little girl had passed out from oxygen deprivation. But thankfully, her vitals were stable. After the combat medics finished administering emergency oxygen to her, they slowly turned and stared at Riley in dead silence. Every single person in the staging area was staring at her. Riley stared back in total silence. She raised her arm, and another chunk of blackened, roasted flesh sloughed off the bone. The moment she burst out of that sea of fire, she had been perfectly captured by the news crew's telephoto lenses. The footage was immediately broadcast across every major network and video platform. The federal government fought frantically to suppress the trending hashtags Struxislease, but varying voices across the internet were all screaming the exact same question. Is that thing even human anymore? Dragging her half-rotted skeletal body, Riley sat quietly in the back of the armored command vehicle, listening to the top brass completely lose their minds over the comms. "The public is going to find out sooner or later," Riley said. "Tell them the truth right now. At least give them time to mentally prepare for what's coming. The unknown is the most terrifying thing of all." The top brass clearly froze for a second. Immediately after, there was a flurry of movement on the other end of the line. Another voice, one that was hauntingly familiar, filtered through the earpiece I understand your concerns, but the federal government has a massive amount of variables to weigh. Human nature is the most unpredictable, volatile element of all. If we tell them right now that they only have 1 year left before the apocalypse hits, a massive portion of the population will adopt the mindset of we only have 1 year left anyway. They will incite violence. They will spark conflicts and riots. Civil order will descend into absolute chaos until there is nothing left. Before the apocalypse even arrives, human nature will destroy the world first. In her past life, Riley had frequently huddled around jury-rigged radio towers. Listening to this exact voice break through the static, the man on the other end possessed a voice that was resolute, yet incredibly gentle. Tears spilled from Riley's eyes almost instantly. In the apocalypse, through all the blood, grit, and survival, she had never shed a tear. Yet, getting a second chance at life, she was crying them all out. It was so strange. Her blood had completely dried up, but her tears were as endless and overflowing as her emotions. When you chose to step forward and report this to the federal government, you should have trusted us. Riley let out a bitter, choked laugh, finishing his sentence for him. Trust that you can protect the people. Trust that the blue skies and clear oceans will return. Trust that the endless night will be shattered by the dawn. Trust in the 1 in 10,000 chance of a beautiful future. Her mangled, skeletal hand clenched tightly in the empty air. She cracked a wide grin and started laughing out loud, until the tears choked her throat, until her vocal cords were so shredded she couldn't spit out a single coherent word. Give the operation a name, the voice from the Pentagon said. Riley stepped out of the mobile command vehicle. The torrential downpour showed absolutely zero sign of letting up. The raging fury of the megafire was finally being beaten back. Countless wildland firefighters were charging toward the front lines. Every single person looked so battered, so exhausted, and yet so fiercely, defiantly alive. The operation is called Project Return. If you think watching a teenager burn to the bone on live TV is the peak of the panic, wait until the earth actually splits open.